This podcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge these traditional owners and pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and any Aboriginal people listening. Welcome to Duck Rabbit Goose, the podcast where we compare and contrast two different board games that have one core element in common and see where the discussion takes us. Your hosts are myself, Jarrod.
And James. Hello.
And today we'll be talking about Dominion and Abandon All Artichokes, both of which have deck building in common.
So the first section of our podcast is called Just the Facts. In this section, we're going to talk about a few essential facts to each of the games we're talking about today. And we're going to introduce the basics of the mechanism that we're focusing on. So we're focusing on deck building and what Dominion and Abandon All Artichokes reveal about this mechanism. So before we get to our essential facts about these two games, let me just briefly outline the essence of the deck building mechanism itself.
And it's a good clarification, James, because deck building takes off after what are commonly called deck construction games.
Now, that is a point that I want to explore a bit further in my definition, Jarrod.
Excellent.
So, let's say that deck building to begin with is about curating a deck of cards to achieve a certain aim, such as buy victory points or be the first to get to a certain place on the board. Now, I think deck building really revolves around making strategic decisions about the cards you acquire and the cards you trash to construct an engine or a helpful set of combinations of cards. Now, to come back to the point that you just made, Jarrod, putting together this definition, I realised that it's actually a fundamental aspect of deck building that the building itself needs to happen during the game. It can't happen pre-game because that's why Magic the Gathering is not a deck builder. So what was the word that you
deck
used?
construction.
Okay,
is the way the categories I've seen used, James. And I think the idea that within the context of the game, you haven't just been dealt a hand of cards.
Yeah.
You've built a deck from which you draw your hand.
Yeah.
Is a new experience for a lot of people with card games.
And part of the game is also you are competing over a common source of cards, isn't it? Whereas in Magic the Gathering, you pre-game, you're off in your own spaces, putting together your own awesome decks. There's no competition about your access to the cards.
Yeah, the closest the Magic the Gathering or the trading card games get to that is a drafting experience where everyone opens packs of cards, takes one and passes the rest to their left or their right. So there's some of the formats for Magic the Gathering have some of the experience of the deck building, but in the modern classic deck building, which Dominion is where we're going to get start. The decks, the cards, the options are there in front of you in the market, and everyone starts in the same place.
Also, typically in a deck building game, you draw a hand of cards from your deck on your turn, and you use that hand of cards to carry out the actions on your turn. So those are some of the fundamentals about deck building itself. Jarrod, tell me some essential facts and something interesting, something curious about Dominion.
Well, Dominion very much gets to be widely regarded, I think, as the foundational deck building game in contemporary board games. It's released in 2008. Goes on to win the Game of the Year or the Spiel des Jahres that year, and is the first card game to win that competition. The things to know about Dominion, as well as being generally considered the genre-defining game.
Well, it often has that phrase, the Queen of Deck Builders, you see on the internet all the time to describe it.
And the success is distinguished or exemplified by the 16 different expansions that have been released since, and with more to come. Over 2.5 million copies sold. lots of online videos of how to play Dominion, but as a curiosity, the easiest way to explain it is ABC.
Yeah.
Everyone starts with 1A, action, 1B, buy phase, and 1C, cleanup phase, where the cards they've used and the ones they haven't are discarded and you draw your new hand.
And that mechanism it developed really remains like the gold standard, doesn't it, of deck building mechanisms. And it feels funny to me that... What year did you say it was produced? 2008. 2008. Like, that seems... Like, when you use deck building as a mechanism, it feels like such an intuitive game mechanism. It feels strange to me that it's only from 2008. Like, this feels to me like something that, should have been around as long as, other kind of iconic board game systems.
Well, it highlights how much contemporary board games have been made and developed in the last 17 years, that it's so quickly become part of the furniture of the game industry. The only equivalent outside of the deck construction, the Magic and Pokemon and others, when you think about a game like 500, one of the advantages of winning the call in 500, a classic 4-player playing card game, is that you get to take the 3 cards out of the kitty and then control your offsuit. It's the closest earlier example I can think of.
Yeah.
What about Abandon All Artichokes?
Okay, well, it's often billed as a deck wrecker, as a kind of a fun pun on deck builder, because the aim of Abandon All Artichokes is to not gain victory points like in Dominion, but to not draw artichoke cards on your turn. So you kind of want to wreck your deck, but I want to interrogate that a bit more later on in the podcast today, Jarrod. It was produced in 2020, so it's a much more recent game than Dominion. And it was produced by GameRight. So it's a family-oriented publisher. We know GameRight is, and definitely that's the whole vibe of Abandon All Artichokes. It's a much more lightweight game than Dominion. And in fact, on Board Game Arena, it's got a 1.26 weighting, and Dominion has double that.
Yep.
It's got a 6.6 Board Game Geek popularity rating too. So that's less than Dominion, and that perhaps reflects its less, perhaps substantial or serious mechanisms that it has. So it's a relatively simple and short game. So those are a couple of facts. A curious fact that I wanted to share, though, is why is the artichoke the villain vegetable? And this is both a curious fact, but this is also something that I want to circle back to later on in the podcast, and I'm kind of signposting this for you now, Jarrod, that there's something about the theme of these games that I want to explore, and the link between the mechanism and the theme. And the reason I'm talking about this now is like why artichokes as the villain? Like, that feels a bit random to me. The game was actually designed by Emma Larkins, and she's mentioned in interviews that she thought the artichokes were a funny vegetable to build the game around, and that kind of makes sense from GameRight's perspective, that it gives it a fun family vibe, but it also kind of feels a bit random to me,
which makes it a perfect foil, I think, for our conversation today.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Duck Rabbit Goose, where we're getting into the middle section of our podcast, where we compare and contrast the two games today, Dominion and Abandon All Artichokes. James, one of the reflections I've had coming back to the both for this recording today was how important the physical experience with a deck building game is. Yeah,
it's surprising how much satisfaction you get out of just handling a deck of cards. And certainly I had forgotten that how much I just enjoy counting out the 5 cards at the start of each turn. Even at the very start of Abandon All Artichokes, where all you're counting out is artichokes.
I find myself shuffling my
yes.
10 artichokes every time, as if it's going to make any difference.
And it's such an instinctive thing, and again that's what I said at the start, that I'm surprised that deck building is such a relatively recent game mechanism, because it feels so instinctive when you play it, but the physicality is common to both.
What's important in the way the two games use deck building is that Artichokes, your 10 cards at the start, everyone has the same, where Dominion has the 3 victory point cards and 7 money cards. So it's partly the extra complexity in Dominion, that you're using money to buy actions, to buy more money to get better victory points. But it just gives them that's one of the main points of difference in them from a complexity perspective. One thing they do both have in common, though, once you know these games and you're familiar with the idea of drawing a hand, playing a card, discarding to a discard, and then drawing another, they both work really well online. Yeah. With that caveat, if you're familiar with the game. I've had some experiences of trying to teach both, I think, in online forms. Yeah. And it's a very disorientating experience in 2 dimensions.
Yeah. And certainly when you read the rules of both of them, perhaps more so with Dominion, because it's a more complex game than Artichokes, but there's a lot of stuff at the start about how you physically set up your game areas and where your draw pile is and where the trash pile is and where your discard pile is. So it's, you've got those the physical spots that you're dealing with, and that helps you understand the ABC, as you said, for Dominion, which is there's a similar process for Artichokes, but it makes sense in a physical environment. But online, you kind of you're taken away from that, and that kind of speaks to how tactile both of the experiences, how tactile the deck building process is. It is still fun when you play online, but that
and on Dominion online, very easy game to get into. Dominion.games is the main online platform, but I think it's in some of the other ones. Very very familiar, very efficient, and so it takes away a lot of the other side of deck building, is the shuffling and constructing in game. What about for yourself, James? What were any common or contrasting elements for these two?
I thought one common element was, and I think this is important to all deck builders and an important part of the deck building mechanism, is that there is a common market or a common pool of cards, because that is what makes it a interactive game, in that you're competing to an extent, perhaps more so with Dominion, again, because it's a more complex game, but you're strategically competing over your acquisition of the cards from that common pile. With Abandon All Artichokes, it kind of makes it a bit more random, because the garden row is constantly replenished. But in Dominion, because that set of 10 cards in the centre is there.
And it's actually 16 cards by the time you include the 3 victory cards.
That's right.
And 3 treasure cards in the base game.
Yeah.
Can go up to another 8 cards.
Yeah.
With the prosperity expansion.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed replaying Dominion this week is, because you're all reaching for that same central pool of cards, of course you're seeing what other people do, and even though you don't have to in Dominion, I don't know what it was like when you played, but you find that need to verbalise your turn. On my turn, I'm putting this down, and you have to explain to everyone else what you're doing as a way of both kind of validating that you're not cheating, because you can have a lot of actions in Dominion, and it can look like you're kind of doing something that might not be kind of within the rules. So I guess explaining it as a way of, ensuring that you're following the rules. But anyway, so you explain your actions, and I'm going to be, taking this card or this card, this card.
My village will give me 2 actions and a card.
Yeah. So you start to notice, of course, you see every turn what people are buying, and that to me also, I really responded to what other people were doing. Oh, you're buying the village. I should buy a village too. Or you've gone the moat, or you've gone... So it's...
The communal experience with this sort of game, where there's that common market of cards and people are doing different things with it, is really interesting, because I was about to say they're strangely individualistic games.
Yeah.
They're not a game where not quite a game where you've got your own little tableau or your own little mat, but also because it's a hand of cards that you're sort of constructing. I don't want to go too deep into any one of the cards. As I say, there's lots of... I tried to do some statistics on which games have had the most video and podcast reviews. I feel like Dominion will be among the top half dozen.
Yeah.
But I must admit, something simple in Dominion is using the chapel card to thin your deck.
Yeah.
I'd been playing the game 10 years before the power of that mechanism really landed.
Yeah. And that is something I was playing Dominion during the week with a new player. So I was really trying to explain how different cards work, and your reflection on the chapel kind of resonates with me in that I was trying to explain how different cards are more powerful or more useful at different times. And I think that is really quite a distinction between the two games. So no, that's not fair. I think that in Abandon All Artichokes, some cards are more useful than others at different points. So you might want to have the carrot card at the start to get rid of artichokes.
I want to pick you up though, James, on the question of the relative complexity or weight, which is always one of those hard things to measure in games. Yeah. Like the luck, skill, strategy distinctions, because Abandon All Artichokes for a new player is completely confounding. Yeah, it's quite a strange experience. Well, I've got these cards; they're all the same. Am I trying to get rid of them, or am I trying to keep them? It's a strangely confusing game if you don't play it a lot. And I suppose that's the other point with Dominion. That initial, even though Dominion is actually a pretty accessible game, the initial burden of familiarity and the little bit of coaching that's kind of needed. Otherwise, people have a bad experience of, this guy clearly knows what he's doing. He's bought all the gold already. I think there's an interesting tension. It's a common complication for both of them that they're not as accessible as they look. Yeah. Well, okay. Let me kind of respond to that. Push back slightly on that. I certainly take on board about what you say about Abandon All Artichokes being a bit confounding, and I wonder whether that's because it's more luck based. I've got here in my notes, difference between the two is that Artichokes is more luck based and Dominion is more skill based, and I would kind of support that by, you kind of have some sense in Dominion about who's going to win. By halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, you know that I'm not going to get enough victory points. Yep. Player X over there, it's between Player X and Player Y. They're going to have the two because they've got their engine working, and my engine hasn't quite kicked in because I've bought too many moats. I don't know why I went so hard on the moats. They have not come through. I must admit the merchant has led me astray many a time. Yeah, but with Abandon All Artichokes, I was playing it again with a new player, and we were up to whatever our 7th or 8th round, and I've suddenly won, and the game just abruptly came to an end, and it could have been any of us who suddenly drew 5 non-artichoke cards, and she drew it, and
even though she kind of understood the mechanics of the game, didn't quite understand how she came to be in a winning position.
And one of my players last night made exactly that point. It's always a bit anticlimactic.
Yeah.
In Abandon All Artichokes.
Yeah.
Oh, and suddenly, because it happens at the end of your turn.
Yeah.
The other person's starting to think about their turn. Actually, don't bother. I just won.
Whereas, to push back on what you're saying about Dominion being complex, it certainly feels complex because there's lots of cards and they seem to be rules heavy with all of that text on the bottom. But this player kind of picked up relatively quickly that this is how you build your engine, or this is how the action cards work in combination with each other. And I was surprised. I had anticipated it being a more complex experience, but this person found it reasonably intuitive.
I think once if you've got someone who's got that mindset, maybe because something like Dominion, 17 years later, so many of the concepts are now embedded in other games. I can see. I would even say it's more in the complicated category than the complex. Partly because it doesn't have the level of player interaction. One thing, and might be a good closing comment for our compare and contrast, James, is both of them are Moorish.
Yeah.
They're both games that you finish that game and think, ooh, I think I now get how I could combine those two cards.
Yeah.
And particularly in Dominion, where there's these 10 key market cards, you think, actually I can see that the big decisions I made in my first 3 turns when I make sure I have lots of money. Yeah,
I would definitely agree that there's always a sense afterwards that you could have got a certain combination working better, or you could have more effectively used the card at a certain point. And they both show that mechanism of deck building is really enjoyable. That sense of, I can see how I could have constructed this a little bit better. And that makes it fun. Welcome back to the third section of Duck Rabbit Goose. This section is called So What? This is where we kind of talk about some of the bigger picture implications of the game, or we offer some commentary, hopefully insightful, about the symbolic, cultural or psychological meaning of the game,
or just things that don't fit anywhere else. But they've got us thinking.
What's some type of big picture thing that you have to say, Jarrod?
I'm glad you've framed it as big picture because I want to talk about the boxes that the games come in.
All right, yeah. Thinking inside the box.
Thinking inside the box. I think it's notable that Dominion, as a modern contemporary classic, comes in a 12-inch by 12-inch standard games box. It's the size game box that fits perfectly in an IKEA Kallax bookshelf, which is notoriously the bookshelf of choice for the game collector. And so I think it's passing strange that it's perfectly balanced in that box, heavy box of lots of cards, where Abandon All Artichokes, suiting its kind of quirky framing, is in a small tin that's shaped a bit like an artichoke. Which has great shelf appeal for the consumer, but talking to a board game retailer is one of the reasons why it can be hard to buy. Because it's a pain in the neck to stock. It has to sit on the top of a shelf. It takes up a lot of space.
And certainly online, serious gamers, and for people listening, you can't see me using my fingers as
air quotes.
Serious gamers have a kind of some type of intense dislike for the tin for the reasons you just said, Jarrod, that it doesn't
fit in my Kallax.
That doesn't fit, and that perhaps speaks to the kind of pop culture feeling that Game Right are trying to go with this game, as opposed to Dominion, who have a more conventional aim. And this is perhaps where I want to start thinking bigger picture, Jarrod.
I'm still on the box, Joe. Still on the box shape. Because Rio Grande, the publisher of Dominion, definitely in that more classic genre. And I'm just in terms of confirming where we fit in that spectrum. If we're not right there with the connoisseurs, I'm probably more in the casual hobbyist.
Yes.
So I don't mind what shapes my games come in.
Yeah.
But for artichokes, it does live in a small cardboard box that I've labelled games that come in tins and bags. Because that's the way I've worked out how to fit it in a cupboard. Is you put the box in a box with other boxes.
Yeah. That's really okay. All right, I can see that.
You can see why that was worth the labour.
Just on moving slightly bigger picture from the box itself. Just one of the things that is curious to me about both games, Jarrod, is the theme of the game, the vegetables, or the kind of pseudo medieval theme of Dominion. To me, playing these games, I never once thought about that theme. And this is something that you often see in board game reviews, that this game has got a really light-on theme. You know, as if when we play Catan, we're actually thinking about being voyagers in some island. Like you don't ever really think about those things in any game. But it was, on reflection, it was something that I never once thought about being some type of medieval villager or castle owner when I bought or played one of the cards in Dominion. And certainly when I played Abandon All Artichokes, beyond, it's got a fun tin and a name about artichokes, like I never once thought about assuming the role of a vegetable when I'm playing the leek card or the corn card, pea card. But what I wanted to say about both games is I think that there is a strong role-playing component of both. Because even though I never thought about being some type of medieval villager or a gardener in either game, I did have a strong sense of being in control of my deck. And for me, the power of both games is that you're assuming the role of being a deck builder. The theme in both is completely incidental, but
it's called the agency and art of board games.
But taking on the role of a deck builder, I had a very strong sense of I'm actually really building a deck that I've got control over.
And when you think back to those deck construction games, that there is a bit of player personality involved. In Magic the Gathering, I'm going to choose the red cards, and they're the more aggressive cards. Or I'm going to choose the white cards, and they're the health and protection cards. And I can see that there is a touch of that in Dominion, because it's got the more choices in the initial market. And that, as I was saying before, that early choices about your first cards really affect the economics is probably the correct term, but the ratios of your deck. You go from 10 cards to 12 if you bought 2 money. You now really change the overall numbers. Where for me, artichokes, I don't have that experience. Partly because I've never really played it well. I've had it for 5 years. I've really enjoyed playing it. But every time it's like whatever's coming up, and I'm throwing cards and picking things up.
So for me, playing both games, and perhaps more Dominion, and I think perhaps what you're saying about Abandon All Artichokes is that you can never fully get control of your engine somehow, because it's just a bit more random. But both games to me reveal that one reason that deck building is popular is that you can develop a really strong sense of control and ownership over your deck. And you said earlier, Jarrod, that after the conclusion of these games, you can be thinking through, I could have done this or this, or I want to play again. And for me, that's part of the experience of deck building, the sense that you can...
How do I make that merchant work?
You can build... So that kind of also made me think about perhaps some of the psychological impact of both these games. I want to suggest to you, Jarrod, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this, that there are 4 archetypal components of board games, and each of these components is somehow linked to a kind of deeply human psychology. Dice, for example, is about our sense that life is about chance, but somehow we can have control over that chance. We roll the dice, and we have a desire to have control of that, or we have superstitions. I'm gonna blow into my hands. And a board, the board game, the board itself is another component. The board represents...
The world is knowable.
Yeah, it represents our need for territorial control, or that life is some type of journey, and we kind of track pieces along that.
Yeah.
So there's the board game, there's dice, there's pieces we move along, and I'm suggesting to you that the fourth kind of basic archetypal component of games is cards.
Yep.
And, so now I was thinking through what is it about cards that represents our human psychology.
I'm just counting on my fingers whether we've missed a type of component, because we haven't talked about miniatures, and they're always good fun.
Yeah. I'm putting them under kind of pieces or meeples. Yeah, so I've got what is it about cards that is something archetypal? And I've helpfully got in my notes ... so that obviously meant that I was waiting to see what you had to say about it. But
there's something statistically different in the way dice behave and cards behave, depending on the game and how the mechanics are structured. Because with a deck, once I've bought I feel like the merchants had a pretty good run today. I've bought a robber. I can't wait to bring that up. In my deck, and it's going to come.
Yeah.
Where with dice, you may never roll a 6. It's unlikely, but it may never happen.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in terms of the board game categories, deck building is often co-paired with bag building or pool building. Because it's a situation where you're putting things in to a controlled pool.
Yeah.
So if you think about a game like the Quacks of Quedlinburg.
Yes.
Is the main example I can think of where the bag became a bit of a popular mechanic.
Yeah.
And when we were deciding what were the 2 deck building games to play with in this podcast, Jason, we were wrestling with things like I've forgotten its name momentarily. That's Clank.
Yes.
Which has both a bag and a deck and a board.
Yeah.
And so deck building with these 2 games is the whole game.
Yeah.
When it's combined with worker placement and other things.
Yeah.
You get different outcomes.
And certainly knowing that this card is going to come up in your deck somehow in the future, that kind of, I think that gels with what I was talking about before, that when we play deck builders, we feel some type of control over our deck.
Yeah, which comes back a bit to the personality construction roots in deck construction. In terms of game and theme, and sometimes people distinguish between setting, which is, this game happens to be set in a medieval world, but the theme of the medieval world and the experience of living in a feudal society, that's missing.
I see. Yes.
I've heard some people try and tease out that distinction. I know a lot of people do comment that Dominion wears its theme lightly.
Yeah.
And I think that's correct, but I don't think it's fair. It doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just because we're so familiar with fantasy and medieval themes in board games. I think it is correct that some of the cards make no sense.
Yes.
And it would be stronger if there's why does a smithy give you 3 cards?
Yeah.
What is it about woodwork that means you've got more resources?
Yeah.
That could have been done differently.
Yes.
In a way that would actually probably make the teaching easier.
Yeah.
Because people are often looking for those contextual clues.
Yeah.
So I think there's something in that, but equally I'm fairly relaxed, and maybe it's more around, for me, the gameplay experience and trying to make the combinations work, that I can live with the theme being worn a bit lightly.
So those are some big picture reflections about Dominion and Abandon All Artichokes.
Well, thanks for listening to today's episode of Duck Rabbit Goose.
Thank you.
Certainly, honourable mentions for today, James. If this episode is Deck Building 101, we mentioned before, Clank and Clank in Space is another series that uses deck building in a a more complicated way.
Quest for El Dorado we considered because it also has the board game element like Plank.
It's a simpler but a very sleek combination of the two. But certainly keen to hear any other recommendations or reflections. Our email is DuckRabbitGoose, all one word, at gmail.com. Alternative titles for today's episode included The Shuffling Games. That credit to Shelfside Reviews for that one. They do quite a good line in comedy videos. And we're happy to share some more links and discussion wherever you found this podcast.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.